بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. I welcome you back to our course on Safinat al-Naja, the ship of salvation by Imam al-Hadrami. At least the text is. This is a Shafi'i work, a primer written for Shafi'i students so that we can have an introduction to Islamic law based on the perspective of the Shafi'i school of thought. Alhamdulillah, we've reached a new chapter, and that is the chapter on prayer or Salah. We will discuss in this lesson, inshallah ta'ala, the valid excuses for missing Salah, 8 conditions of Salah, some of the ritual impurity or impure states that we need to be aware of as they form part of the conditions, the 4 levels of awrah, the Adhan, call to pray, and the iqama, call of commencement, as well as the conditions of the call to pray bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. قال الله عز وجل, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أن أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة. Those who they believe in the unseen and they establish the prayer. وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, and from that which we sustain them with, they spend. And the scholars are basically unanimous that this refers to Salah 5 times a day and the obligatory zakah. So now we commence with the course text, inshallah ta'ala. The Musannif introduces a new chapter, a fasl, a new section as well. And the first element of discussion is in relation to the excuses. Now, Salah is an obligatory aspect in the life of a believer. Salah is the major pillar of faith after believing. So when somebody embraces Islam, as you saw in the introduction to the course with the 6 arkan of Iman, once you have an idea of the 6 arkan and you believe in them, then you are a believer. But you become a true believer when you publicly testify. You say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. So that is your kalima. And the kalima, the testification of faith, actually forms the first pillar of Islam. So we said Islam has 5 pillars. The first pillar is the kalima, the shahada, the testification of faith. Tamam? So once you embrace Islam and you've declared the testification of faith publicly with witnesses, you are considered to be a Muslim. Now, once you are a Muslim, then automatically, because you've submitted to the faith, you also now need to submit to the practice. And as far as the practice of Islam is concerned, the first and most important practice that is going to be prevalent and relevant for every single day of one's life going forward is the prayer. The prayer is the foundation of one's practice as a Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ gave us very, very strong warnings about missing the prayer, about not praying, saying that the difference between the believer and the non-believer is the prayer. And the prayer is the first element of our practice that we will be questioned about on the Day of Judgment. And if we are successful in our prayer, in other words, if we have prayed every single prayer and on time, then we will be successful with the remainder of the questions that will be asked of us on the Day of Judgment. But if we fail to answer the question about prayer successfully, then we would be failures on the Day of Judgment because every subsequent question would also be a failure. And this makes complete sense because in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it very clear. He says, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ. Salah, the prayer, tanha, will be a deterrent from fahsha, immodesty and indecency, wal munkar, and evil acts, right? Bad deeds. So in relation to this, we can understand why the first question on the day of Qiyamah is going to be about the prayer, and why that if the person answers the first question correctly or successfully, then he or she will automatically be successful in the subsequent questions. And that is simply because having prayer firmly established in one's life would automatically lead to a balanced life, a life of complete consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the prayer is throughout the day, 5 times a day. It would lead to a constant purification process, because from one prayer to the next prayer, we expiate all of the sins, or Allah expiates all of the sins that we've occurred or incurred between the prayers, at least the minor sins thereof, and tawbah is required for the major sins. And the prayer would give us a solid deterrent to stay away from evil, which is going to be a means for our salvation in the world hereafter from Jahannam. May Allah grant us all success and salvation from the fire of Jahannam. So it is critically important for every believer to understand the prayer and to establish the prayer. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the prayer in the Quran by way of saying, aqama yuqimu, those who establish the prayer. So the prayer must really be an establishment in our lives. Like you see some brand name clothing where they advertise on their own clothing, they say established in, and they give a particular year. This is so that the consumers and people who see these products, they are aware of the fact that this brand has been around and it intends to continue to be around for many years, and it's an establishment. So similarly, in the Quran, over 80 times, Allah uses the word aqimu in its different forms, establishment, and then connected with the word salah. And connected with that also the zakah, which is something that we'll deal with later. So the salah is really our focal point as far as our life of worship as believers is concerned. The first few lessons, I think the first 7 or so lessons, or at least all the lessons before this, were focused on tahara, on purification, because purification is the key to the prayer, and the prayer is the key to paradise, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, "Miftahu salati at-tahur wa miftahu al-jannati as-salah wa miftahu salati at-tahur." The keys to paradise is the prayer, and the keys to the prayer are the processes of purification. So we learned about purification not for the sake of learning about purification, but because we need to implement those rules in order for us to be ready to pray and stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in prayer. So with that said, now we're going to focus on the prayer itself. And the first chapter that the author has decided to commence this discussion with is on the valid excuses for missing the prayer. So this means that there are no excuses for missing the prayer except what is going to be mentioned here. And anyone who misses the prayer without having these two valid excuses would be considered liable for punishment by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unless they, of course, turn to Allah in tawbah. And anyone who misses the prayer is obliged to make up for that prayer, but that wouldn't remove the liability for punishment, because there are two issues. The one issue is praying, and the other issue is praying as you are instructed to pray, which includes praying on time. So with this said, we go into the text inshallah ta'ala. Faslun fi a'dhar as-salah, regarding the excuses of the prayer. أعذار الصلاة إثنان, the excuses, أعذار, plural of عذر. The plural of عذر is أعذار, and it's the mudaf to the word as-salah, which is the mudafun ilayh. أعذار الصلاة, the excuses of prayer, meaning of missing the prayer. إثنان are two. النوم, sleep. والنسيان, and forgetfulness. So to clarify, sleep, right? Sleep is a person was asleep before the time of prayer and remained asleep until the time ended. When any salah is due but not yet performed, and one wishes to lie down for a while, and he is certain to awaken in time to carry out this duty, it will be makruh for him to sleep or lie down. However, if he is not at all certain as to whether he will wake up in time or not, then it is considered haram. So, if a person goes to bed at night and they set their alarm for Fajr Salah, so they have every intention of praying Fajr on time as it is meant to be prayed, so they set their alarm and then they go to bed. If such a person oversleeps, so let's say they hit the snooze button, or the alarm wasn't set correctly, or they just slept through the alarm, and then they miss the Fajr prayer as a consequence, such a person is completely excused. Another example would be a person who takes an afternoon nap, and they take their afternoon nap before the waqt of Asr enters. Then they sleep through Asr prayer, but they had the intention of making Asr prayer. They wouldn't have intentionally overslept. But then they did oversleep. Such a person is excused. They have a valid excuse, and they would pray a make-up or qada prayer as soon as they wake up. But what the author has also indicated to here is that this is for somebody who sleeps without the intention of missing the prayer. As for the person who goes to bed at night with no intention of making Fajr Salah, they do not set the alarm, they do not take any necessary precautions against oversleeping for Fajr, and consequently they don't make Fajr on time. They cannot say, well, I'm excused because one of the excuses for missing the prayer is to be sleeping, because that person had no such intention, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Then, if a person, as is indicated in the footnote here, that when a salah is due, so let's say the waqt of Asr enters, but the person didn't yet perform the waqt of Asr, they didn't yet perform the Asr prayer, but they're so tired, they want to lie down for a while and still have the intention to wake up in time to pray Asr on time. And they go to bed, but they are certain, look, I'm going to wake up in time to carry out the Asr prayer. Still, it would be considered makruh or disliked for such a person to sleep because they had not yet performed the Asr prayer. However, if this person is, for example, so tired, so exhausted, and they're thinking to themselves, look, I don't know whether I'll be able to wake up for Asr prayer or not, but the Asr prayer already entered, so they can pray Asr now. So they go to bed. For them to go to bed not being certain that they'll wake up for Asr is considered haram. So that should be taken full note of, inshaAllah ta'ala. Then we look at the second excuse. An-nisyan, forgetfulness. Now, forgetfulness here is again not somebody who is nonchalant about the prayer. They don't pray regularly, they don't think about the prayer, it's not a huge concern for them. So they go about their day and they just they forget about it, meaning they know that they must pray, but they don't think about it. That's not forgetfulness. Forgetfulness here is the person who prays and have a habit of praying. They would pray if they remembered, but they were preoccupied with something and they genuinely forgot to pray, and the waqt had missed them. So that would be considered a genuine excuse for missing the prayer. But for the person who knows the prayer is current and they need to pray, and they delay their prayer, and then they forget to make up for that prayer, they forget to make that prayer on time later. So they didn't forget, they were consciously aware of making that prayer earlier. So from the footnote number 3, he says, a person forgot that he did not perform the salah and only remembered after the time of salah expired. This should not be due to unmindfulness, due to engrossment in playing like chess or any other games, for example, in which case he will be sinful. Okay, so that covers forgetfulness. Then in footnote number 1, there's a note here that says, a third excuse is for a person who delayed the salah to combine 2 salahs during a journey. But of course, that isn't an excuse for missing the salah. That is a dispensation for praying outside of its waqt. But the person is not going to miss the salah because even though they're praying outside of its waqt, they are doing so with a legitimate and valid shar'i reason to do so. So these are the only 2 excuses for missing the prayer, and there are severe consequences for a person who misses the prayer intentionally. The overwhelming majority of scholars are of the opinion, and this is the preponderant view in the Shafi'i school as well, that the person who misses the prayer intentionally is considered to be a Muslim still, but there are serious dunyawi and ukhrawi consequences, meaning this worldly and otherworldly consequences for their intentionally missing the prayer. In this world, they are subject to serious capital punishment, and they will be treated very severely, even in terms of should they pass away, and in terms of how they are to be buried. We won't get into the details of that at this level of study, inshallah ta'ala. There are also opinions, it is a minority view, but it is a serious opinion to consider nonetheless. One view within the Hanbali school considers a person who misses their prayer intentionally without a valid excuse to be a non-believer. And based on that opinion, some scholars said they don't even need to bother making up for that prayer because there's no make-up prayers for a person who was not a Muslim. So that's an indication of the severity of missing one's prayer intentionally. However, it is important to note that this is not the majority view. Instead, the majority opinion is that the person is still a Muslim, is still a believer, but he or she would have to make up for those prayers when they do eventually make tawbah and turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah make us steadfast in our prayers. Ameen. So now we proceed to the next segment of text, inshallah ta'ala, and this is about fi shuruti salah. Now, in every chapter of study in Islamic law, you are generally going to find the definition, right? And that's usually analyzed in terms of the lexical and the technical definitions. So in other words, the dictionary meaning of a particular word like salah, and then the technical definition of that word. So for example, salah linguistically is referred to or is explained as being supplication, as being dua, because salah includes dua and overall it has a form of a supplication. The technical definition of salah is a specific set of words and a specific set of actions that commences with the takbir and that ends with the taslim. It commences with Allahu Akbar and it ends with Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. So after dealing with the definition in some level of detail, the next general discussion that you'll find in Islamic law contexts is the shurut. So you'll have the conditions. After the conditions, you'll have the arkan, the integrals of that particular practice, and then after the integrals, you will generally have the sunan. So the shurut are conditions. These conditions, what is a condition? If you speak about a condition for a particular contract, it means that it's something that must be in order, it must be in place before the contract will be valid. Similarly, with Islamic law, the shurut are obligatory elements of a particular practice that need to be in place in order for the action to be valid. The integrals or arkan, they are the components of the action itself. So the shurut and the arkan, the conditions as well as the integrals, they are both obligatory components of any particular action. The difference is that the conditions or the shurut, they lie outside of the action itself and need to be in place before commencing with that particular action. The arkan, on the other hand, they form part of the action itself, and any element that's missing thereof, both the shurut and the arkan, would cause the action to be either null and void or to be deficient, that can be made up potentially, or it would just be invalid altogether. So in relation to this, we are looking now at the shurut or the conditions of the salah. Shurutu salati thamaniyatun. The conditions of the prayer are 8. So we'll go through them and then we'll explain as we go along. Firstly, he says, taharatul hadathain, to be pure of the two ritual impure states. What are the two ritual impure states? For now, they are the minor form of ritual impurity and the major form of ritual impurity. The minor form of ritual impurity is referred to as hadath, and the major form of ritual impurity is called janaba. And the minor form of ritual impurity is lifted through the practice of wudu, and the major ritual form of impurity is lifted through ghusl. Now we will discuss this in the next section, so for now just consider it as one element that one needs to be free from the ritual impure states. In other words, one needs to have both a ghusl as well as wudu in order for the salah, in order for you to commence with the salah, in order for the salah to be valid. Secondly, purity of the clothing, the body, and the place of performing salah. وَطَهَارَةُ عَنِ النَّجَاسَةِ فِي الثَّوْبِ وَالْبَدَنِ وَالْمَكَانِ. One needs to be pure, meaning free from najasati, from impure elements, impure substances. في الثوب, on one's clothing. والبدن, on one's body. والمكان, and on the place that one will pray. Footnotes connected with number 2 are footnotes 6 and 7. One's salah is invalid if one is holding the end of a rope connected with something impure. Okay, so let's say, for example, like in the Shafi school, a dog is considered to be impure. So if you're holding a leash at the end of which there's a dog, then your prayer would be considered invalid, even though it's not directly attached to your body or your clothing or the place of your prayer. So that's one technical aspect. But besides that, so you have to be free of najasa. So there should be no najasa on your clothing, there should be no najasa on your body, and there should be no najasa on the place that you are praying. However, it is critically important to note that when fiqh discusses elements of being free from najasa, etc., this is not at a microscopic level. Like, no one is duty bound to go and microscopically find if there is any impurity anywhere. Nor is it going to be a requirement for you to be absolutely certain that there's no impurities. So one should never fall into the trap of maybe by some chance there was an animal who urinated on this piece of grass and therefore I can't make salah on grass. Or maybe, while my clothing was hanging on the washing line, maybe there was some najasa or some animal that touched the clothes. Or maybe there's some element of najasa on my body, so I can't pray. All of this is based on waham, on complete speculation, doubt. There's no evidence for it. So the only time where you should consider that there is najasa or contamination of the body, clothing or place is when you have evidence, such as having seen or having been informed by a reliable person that something has been contaminated. One should never act on speculation, for this would lead to waswasa, baseless misgivings, also known as religious scrupulosity. So we don't go on doubts and what-ifs. We go according to evidence. Then the next element that must be in place, the next shart, which is the singular form of the word shurut, is wasatrul awrati, to cover the awra, to cover the private parts. Footnote number 8 explains, it is a necessary condition that the clothing prevents the color of the skin from being exposed and covers the awra from all sides, including above. It is not necessary to cover the awra from beneath. At a thin garment through which the color of the skin is visible is not sufficient. So we will learn shortly, inshallah ta'ala, what exactly constitutes the awra for a male, for a female, and in different conditions. But for now, we need to understand that basically we need to be sufficiently covered in terms of not being able to see through our clothing and see the color of our skin, and not having the shape of our bodies, especially the private areas, being exposed. And it must be covered as has been mentioned from all sides except for the bottom. So let's say you have like a long thobe that's completely, you can't see through it at all, and you put that over your body and you have nothing underneath, and technically you are naked as far as the view from the bottom is concerned. As for from the top down or from any of the sides, you're completely covered. So that would still suffice. It's hypothetical, but it's important to understand that this is what is intended. Number 4, wastiqbalul qiblati. It is a condition of the prayer that one needs to face the direction of the Kaaba, face the direction of the Qibla. Footnote number 9 says, this is a necessary condition for the 5 fard prayers which must be performed while facing the proper direction of Qibla, whether a person is a musafir, traveler, or a muqim, non-traveler, riding in a vehicle or not. A musafir, a traveler, may perform sunnah prayers without facing the direction of the Qibla. So facing the Qibla is a necessary condition. In the Shafi'i school, especially, one should try to face the actual direction of the Qibla, and you should use ijtihad in order to figure out which direction is the Qibla. In other words, use a compass or use some other form of calculation to determine as best as possible what the direction of the Qibla is. The footnote clarified that this is especially important for the 5 obligatory prayers, which you have to be praying in the direction of the Qibla. So this means whether you are traveling on a plane, on a boat, etc., you should still face the direction of the Qibla. That's the default. If you cannot, in the situation of somebody flying on a plane or traveling by some other means of transportation, if they cannot face the direction of the Qibla, because it's against the rules, for example, or there's no space, for example, and they pray, they should still pray, so they can pray seated and facing any direction. However, based on the fact that it is a condition to face the direction of the Qibla, they would have to make up that prayer later on. You may ask, so why can't they just skip the prayer and then make it up later on? Because the Salah must be performed in its waqt. And this is still considering the fact that if you are a traveler and you are on a journey that permits shortening and joining prayers, which we'll of course discuss much later on, you can join prayers earlier or later, so Dhuhr in Asr's waqt, or bringing Asr forward to Dhuhr's waqt and combining those prayers. So you still have to pray within those limitations. And if you, for example, find yourself having to pray Fajr prayer, you cannot move Fajr neither later nor earlier. So you still have to pray that on time. So in the case of Fajr prayer, as an example, you would still have to pray it on time. And then later on, when you can face the direction of the Qibla, you would have to make i'ada or repeat that particular prayer. We go on to the next shart or condition of the prayer, and that is dukhulul waqt, the entering of the time. Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. Salah has been fixed at prescribed times for the believers, so the salah cannot be brought forward because it wouldn't be valid, and it is considered sinful and haram to delay the prayer till beyond its prescribed time. So, in order for the salah to be valid, it is integral that the time of the waqt has entered. So if you look at footnote number 10, a person must be certain about the commencement of the time of salah. If a person is uncertain about the commencement of the time of the salah, which he has performed, then that particular salah will not be correct, even if the salah was in fact carried out in its required time. So it is knowledge of the entry of the time. Unless he applies his ijtihad, discretion, to determine the time of the prayer, in which case it will be correct. If he applies ijtihad and the salah was carried out before or after the time of the salah performed will be considered a qada or make-up prayer, if he has a make-up prayer in his responsibility. Otherwise, it will be considered a nafil or supererogatory prayer. So what this is really saying that you need to know about is, let's say you wake up for Fajr, but you know that you've woken up a bit early. So you are unsure whether the waqt of Fajr has entered or not. So you look at your watch and you see, okay, this is the time. Yesterday, Fajr was at that particular time, so I'm assuming that Fajr has entered already, and the person starts praying. This person is praying with a level of uncertainty as to whether Fajr had entered or not. So they pray their Fajr Salah, and then they come to discover later on that no, they actually prayed Fajr before the time. This person's Fajr prayer would be invalid. But what if the person figures out that no, they actually did pray Fajr on time, the waqt had already entered when they started the Fajr prayer? Still, this person's Salah would be invalid. Why? Because when they prayed, they were uncertain about the fact whether the time for Salah had entered or not. So what is required, what is a shart or a condition, is the knowledge. You have to have certainty, you have to have knowledge that the waqt had entered. So whether this be because you checked the times on the calendars or because you observed the natural phenomenon in the sky and you saw that true dawn had entered, you must know that the waqt had entered before you can commence with the salah, because knowledge of the entry of the waqt or the time is a condition of the prayer. We move on. He says, وَالْعِلْمُ بِفَرْضِيَّتِهَا. It is a condition of the prayer that one know that the prayer is fard. So you have to have knowledge of the prayer being fard, that it is not a sunnah prayer. The next condition is وَأَلَّا يَعْتَقِدَ فَرْضًا مِنْ فُرُوضِهَا سُنَّةً. It is a condition of the prayer that one does not believe that a particular obligatory element or rukn or integral of the prayer, min furudiha, one of its integrals, sunnatan is voluntary or supererogatory or sunnah. So for example, if one prays a particular salah and you believe that the takbiratul ihram, saying Allahu Akbar to start the prayer, you believe that that is a sunnah. You do it, you still do the Allahu Akbar, but in your mind you're thinking this is a sunnah, right? If you have such a belief, because you believed a fard element of the prayer is a sunnah, that is considered an invalid prayer. So it is a condition of the prayer that you understand which elements of the prayer is fard, right? طيب, and then we move on to the next element, and it says واجبات واجتناب المبطلات. And another condition of the prayer is to refrain from those things that would nullify the prayer. To refrain from those things that would nullify the prayer means that there are certain actions, right? Like moving a certain amount of times and consecutively, etc. Eating, right? Speaking. There are certain other actions as well, but in general, it would be these. You have to refrain from those things that would nullify the prayer. That is a condition of the prayer as well. So according to this count, and some other scholars have counted it somewhat differently, but according to this count, these are the conditions of the salah. You have to make sure that these conditions are in place before you commence with the salah. Otherwise, the salah would be invalid. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam, and Allah knows best. Now we move on to the next discussion, and that is teaching us about al-ahdath, the ritually impure states. So we alluded to this a moment ago. We said that there are two types of ritually impure states. Al-ahdathu ithnan. There are two types. Asghar, the minor form of ritual impurity, wa akbar, and the major form of ritual impurity. Fal-asghar, the minor form of a ritual impure state, is ma awjab al-wudu'a. It is that state that requires you to perform an ablution, a wudu, in order for you to pray. Wal akbar, and the major form of a ritual impure state is ma awjab al-ghusla. It is a state that necessitates you to perform a ghusl, a ritual purification bath, in order for you to pray. So basically, the minor form of ritual impurity is the state of not having ablution, right? And then the akbar, the major form of a ritual impure state, is a state of not having a ghusl. And as you know, there can be various ways that one can break the wudu, but at the end of the day, you are in a state of non-wudu. That state is called hadath, right? And it is referred to as al-hadath al-asghar, the minor form of an impure state. Then there's the state of being without ghusl. And again, there can be several reasons why you do not have a valid ghusl. This may be because of sexual intercourse. It may be because of having a wet dream. It may be because of having had one's hayd or having experienced nifas, etc. So any state that removes one state of ghusl, that state is called the major ritually impure state, also known as junub, or in the state of janaba, right? But janaba is a bit specific for sexual intercourse. But in general, it's referred to as al-hadath al-akbar, the major ritually impure state. طيب, and what does it necessitate? It requires you to perform a ghusl, a valid ritualistic bath, in order for your salah to be considered valid thereafter. So those are the two impure states. Now we move on. So that was important because we discussed that you need to be free from both states in order to pray. So you need to remove the state of minor ritual impurity as well as the state of major ritual impurity. To make things easy, it means that you need to have a valid ghusl and a valid wudu before you can pray. The other condition spoke about satrul awra, covering one's awra. So the section here, al-awrat, nakedness, is discussed in order for the realization of that condition. Al-awratu arba'un. The different levels of states of nakedness, arba'un, are four. Awratul rajuli mutlaqan. It is the awra of a man mutlaqan under all circumstances. Wal amati fi salah, as well as a slave girl within prayer. Now, this is a classical legal work, and in times gone by, of course, we know that there has been slavery. Now, Islam does not espouse slavery. Islam does not support it. Islam does not encourage slavery. In fact, it encourages the opposite of that. It encourages the emancipation of slaves. However, when slavery does exist, Islamic law sufficiently addresses slavery so that there is justice for people who find themselves in that state. We are not going to delve into issues of Islam and slavery. However, for anyone interested in those discussions, a very, very beneficial and thorough work has been published not too long ago by one of my teachers, Professor Jonathan Brown of Georgetown University. He's a traditional Muslim scholar, also an academic, and he produces brilliant works. I would encourage you to read his work on, I think it's either Slavery and Islam or Islam and Slavery. I always get too confused, but it's published by Dr. Jonathan A.C. Brown. So if you are interested in that discussion and to get a better understanding as to why, you find in Islamic law that we mentioned slavery and slaves, you can read that particular work, inshallah ta'ala. So this point is saying that there are 4 levels of nakedness. The first discussion of nakedness is the aura of a man and the aura of a slave girl, that is in salah. That aura is ma bayna surrati wa rukbati, what is in between the navel and the knees. And as you can see in footnotes 12 and 13, men includes young boys, even if they are not yet of the age of understanding, right? Even if they are not yet at the age of tamyiz. What is tamyiz? I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but it's basically the age where you can distinguish between good, bad, right, wrong, and you can clean yourself after using the toilet. So even if they are not at that age, this aura still applies. It generally means in all conditions, in all circumstances, whether in salah or outside of salah, whether you are at the beach or the swimming pool, or whether you are in front of your brothers and your sisters, or whether you go to the changing room at the gym, or whatever the case may be, still a man's aura is between the navel and the knees. And of course, this means, as you can see in footnote number 13, the knees and the navel themselves are not part of the aura, but it is wajib, it is obligatory to cover them, or at least part of them, in order to fulfill the command of covering the aura completely. Because مَا لَا يَتِمُّ الْوَاجِبُ إِلَّا بِهِ فَهُوَ الْوَاجِب. That which the obligatory element cannot be attained except by doing something, then that thing is also considered obligatory. So in order to make sure you cover the area between the navel and the knees, it is logically necessary to cover at least part of the navel and at least part of the knees in order to cover that area. And because there's some differences of opinion as to the extent, right? Some include the navel, some include the knees. The best is to cover from on top of the navel till below the knees, and then you know that you are safe. Of course, this is important to note that this is not only inside salah but also outside of salah. So for men, it's generally much easier to keep our auras covered than for women. So it is critically important for us to take this seriously so that we are not liable for any punishment by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other point to also note is that even though this is saying this is the aura in salah and outside of salah, it is by no means saying that men should only cover this area, whether inside salah or outside of salah. This is speaking about the bare minimum of what must be covered, otherwise one is in trouble. But what is encouraged is to cover oneself as modestly as possible under all circumstances, and Allah knows best. So that was the first type of aura that we discussed. The next type of aura is وَعَوْرَةُ الْحُرَّةِ فِي الصَّلَاةِ, the aura of a free person in salah, meaning not a slave. The aura of a free person in salah, specifically جَمِيعُ بَدَنِهَا, and specifically we're speaking about a free woman in salah. جَمِيعُ بَدَنِهَا is her entire body, مَا سِوَى الْوَجْهِ وَالْكَفَّيْنِ, except the hands and the face. So for the Shafi'i school of thought, the entire body of the lady, every single aspect of her body, except the face and hands, must be covered in the prayer. So this means all of the hair, the arms, the wrists, the feet, at least the tops of the feet in the Shafi'i school of thought. The Hanafis don't include that, but everything must be covered inside of the prayer except the face and the hands for women. وَعَوْرَةُ الْحُرَّةِ وَالْأَمَةِ عِنْدَ الْأَجَانِبِ, and the awrah of free ladies, free women, وَالْأَمَةِ, and slaves, عِنْدَ الْأَجَانِبِ, in front of strange men, meaning unmarriageable men. Not unmarriageable men, sorry, marriageable men, meaning men they can get married to, is jami'ul badan, the entire body. The entire body. There is some ikhtilaf within the Shafi'i school and among the other madhahib as to the entire body being the awrah in front of strange men. We were not going to get into the details of that, just basically saying that in the Shafi'i madhab, as with in the case of the Sahaba and other scholars, there's ikhtilaf as to whether the face and hands form part of the awrah or not. So, of course, those who say that it does form part of the awrah, as the author is alluding to here, would say that the entire body, including the face and hands, must also be covered. And the other opinion is that the face and hands are not part of the awrah in front of marriageable men, and therefore they do not need to be covered. So in the Shafi'i school, both opinions are actually preponderant, and the mufti giving the fatwa in any particular area or location or country is at liberty to pass either of the fatawa. That said, the overwhelming majority of traditional scholars of the four Sunni schools of thought are of the opinion that the face and hands are not part of the awrah of women in front of marriageable men. So that is just something to consider there as well. As for details or more details about the niqab in the Shafi'i madhab or in the other madhahib, I would advise you to read up the answers on the Seeker's Guidance Answers Forum for details in relation to that, inshallah. Then, وَعِنْدَ مَحَارِمِهَا, this is the fourth level of awrah, or the fourth type of awrah. وَعِنْدَ مَحَارِمِهَا, in front of unmarriageable kin, people who you cannot get married to. وَالنِّسَاء, as well as other women. مَا بَيْنَ السُّرَّةِ وَالرُّكْبَةِ, the awrah of a lady is that which is in between the navel and the knees, as we've discussed for men earlier on in general, but this is specifically women in front of men that they cannot get married to. So the father, the brother, the son, etc. Of course, this may seem sort of unusual because the breasts are not part of that which is in between the navel and the knees. But remember, we're speaking about the unmarriageable men, the unmarriageable kin. So the brother, the father, the son, etc. A lady may need to breastfeed, and under circumstances such as that, it makes complete sense that they are allowed to, in front of these men specifically, to expose their breasts. Of course, it is not saying that they should always do this. A woman should always be modest, as is the case with a man, but need may necessitate the option to do that, and Allah knows best. So that covers the four types of awrah. We spoke about men, we spoke about the slave in Salah, we spoke about women, both free women as well as slave women. We spoke about in front of marriageable men and in front of unmarriageable men. So do take note of all of this. And the objective behind all of these rules is to fulfill the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of modesty. Modesty is an element of critical importance in faith. The Prophet ﷺ beautifully expressed once, إِن لَمْ تَسْتَحِي فَافْعَلْ مَا شِئْتَ. If you do not have modesty, then you will do whatever you want. In other words, you will have no restriction. In the Quran, in Surah An-Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically gives detailed laws about lowering the gaze, protecting the chastity, guarding the private parts. In the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gives us a guarantee. He says, whoever guarantees for me what is in between their thighs and what is in between their jaws, in other words, the private parts and the tongue, أضمن له الجنة, I will guarantee for that person paradise. The Prophet ﷺ said the matters which take most people to Jahannam are matters pertaining to their private parts and matters pertaining to their tongue. So we should understand that these laws, while seemingly restrictive in the modern contemporary context of how people dress and what people consider to be liberal and liberated, we should understand that the function of these ahkam, of these laws, are not to be restrictive and not to be somewhat overburdening, but instead to liberate us from following the desire of the flesh and following base animalistic instincts, but instead subjecting our desire, subjecting our lusts to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fulfilling our desire in a halal manner. The alternate, in other words, where we do express ourselves and our desires is within nikah. And in nikah, there is no awra between the man and woman. The man and woman who is married in a halal marriage may enjoy one another as much as they want, in whichever way they want. Of course, there are certain restrictions there as well. Anal intercourse is haram. But beyond that, and of course during menstruation is haram, but beyond that, they may enjoy one another. So it's not that Islam is curbing desire as a whole, altogether, but rather restricting desire, human desire, so that we don't act on our impulses, but rather we subject our impulses to divine law so that we are blessed in every aspect of our lives, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So now we've covered the forms of ritualistic impure states. We've covered the forms of the awra. What's next is we are ready for prayer. However, before the actual prayer commences, before we actually start with Allahu Akbar and enter into the prayer, there are certain practices that are sunnah, they are recommended, and those include the call to pray, the call to pray, the adhan, and the call of prayer commencement or the iqama. So there's a note here, and this is not in the original course text, Safinat al-Naja, but it is a useful note that was added in the translation that we've been using, so we'll go through it quickly here. The adhan or call to pray and the iqama, the call to commencement. Both the adhan and iqama are sunnah for the fard salah, whether praying alone or in a second jama'ah, a second congregation of prayer. So both the adhan and the iqama. You will notice that for most people, if they are praying in the masjid, then the first salah they would read the adhan and people would pray. Generally speaking, when people pray alone or when they pray in a second congregation or when they're praying at their homes, they would omit the adhan and they would only read the iqama. For the Shafi'i school of thought, both the adhan and the iqama are going to be sunnah, recommended, whether you are alone or whether you are in a second jama'ah. Even if you are in the middle of the desert and you're the only person there, it is still recommended to say both the adhan and the iqama. And there's a lot of hidden wisdom in that, because it's not only the people and the jinn who are able to hear us, but even the creatures and other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can hear us. And even if nothing could hear us, it is the words and saying the words and engaging in the ibadah that is spiritually charging for us. It will spiritually enrich ourselves, and it is an implementation of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says to call out the adhan is better than being the imam for the salah. This is the Shafi'i view. The person who reads the adhan gets more reward than the person who leads the salah, though the person who leads the salah is considered to get more reward than the person who reads the call of commencement. The words of the adhan in the Shafi'i school is slight variations of the iqama, but I think the adhan and the adhan of both the Shafi'is and other schools of thought are the same. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. As you see, that's 4 times. Now, generally, people would connect 2 and 2. And if you do that, then you'd say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, because you connect it with a dhamma as opposed to with a fatha, which many people mistakenly do. The next lines is Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Some people mistakenly read Ashhadu Allah ilaha illallah. It's Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. The next line reads, وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. Notice again, أَشْهَدُ أَنَّ Muhammadan, and if you read through Muhammadan Rasulullah, as opposed to Ashhadu Anna Muhammadu Rasulullah. It's just, I'm pointing this out because it's mistakes that I frequently hear. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala salah. If you connect them, hayya ala salati, hayya ala salah. Right? Hayya ala al-falah, hayya ala al-falah. And then again, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. The words, what they mean is, from the top, Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest. The second line, I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except Allah. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except Allah. The third line, I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah. The fourth line, come to the salah. The fifth line, come to success. The last line, Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest. And then La ilaha illallah, there is none worthy of worship except Allah. It is sunnah to recite, and this is something that very few people know about and practice, as far as I know. It is sunnah to recite the two testifications of faith, which is Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. To say it in a low, soft voice before calling it out loud. So in other words, one would read Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And then, before saying the next two lines out loud, to say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. And then to read it out loud, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, and so forth. This is a sunnah that has a story attached to it by Abu Mahdura, or an incident between the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Mahdura, which we will not get into right now, but basically the gist of it is that a young boy who was a non-Muslim at the time was sort of making fun of the call to prayer, as sometimes non-Muslims do because they don't understand it. So the Prophet ﷺ called him and he asked him, what did you say now? What were you saying? And then he read the Adhan. And then when he came to this, Shahada, he didn't want to read it out loud because that's ambiguous. Now, am I Muslim now because I'm saying this? So he said it softly. And then the Prophet ﷺ asked him to read it out loud, and then he did. And Abu Mahdura became not only Muslim, but he became one of the mu'adhins of the Prophet ﷺ. That's the gist of the story, and you can find more details about that, inshallah ta'ala. Then to add in the Subh or Fajr prayer before the final takbir, before saying Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, to add as-salatu khayrun minan nawm, as-salatu khayrun minan nawm. The prayer is better than sleep. The prayer is better than sleep. And of course, there are sunnahs in relation to those who listen to the adhan as well. And there are sunnahs in relation to the person who makes the adhan as well. Then the words of the iqama, which is the call of commencement, which should be read in a quicker manner than the adhan, and in a obviously less pronounced manner than the adhan. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, Hayya ala salah, Hayya ala al-falah, Qad qamati salatu, Qad qamati salah, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. There's a distinction between the Shafi'i adhan, the Shafi'i iqama, or call to commencement, and the Hanafi iqama, call to commencement, where the Shafi'is only include the repetition twice as opposed to 4 times, whereas the Hanafis still have the 4 recitations of the takbir and so forth. The other difference in the iqama, and this applies to both Shafi'i and Hanafi, is the addition of قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ. The salah has been established. قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ. Other than that, the words are basically the same, and Allah knows best. So if you are in a situation where there's a mixture of Hanafis and Shafi'is, it's completely fine if a Shafi'i reads the iqama, if a Hanafi reads the iqama. Educate people about the differences and the reason why there's some differences, but there's no reason to fight about it. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. We proceed then to some other notes. When giving the adhan and iqama, it is mustahab or sunnah, recommended in other words, to be in the state of wudu, to stand, to face the qibla, to turn the head, though not the chest or feet, to the right side when saying Hayya ala salah, and to the left side when saying Hayya ala al-falah. To call out the adhan calmly and slowly, pausing for an interval after each phrase of the adhan equal to the duration of the phrase, except for repetitions of Allahu Akbar, which are said in pairs, and then to give iqama rapidly without pausing. To repeat each phrase after the mu'adhin, this is of course for the person who listens to the adhan, even if in the state of janaba, meaning you don't have a ghusl, during menstruation, hayd, or when reciting the Quran, so you stop your recitation and then repeat the words of the mu'adhin, after which you can continue your recitation. It is makruh or disliked to call out the adhan in the state of minor ritual impurity, meaning without wudu. It is considered more makruh to do so in a state of no ghusl, right? And it's even worse to give the iqama, the call to commencement, while in either of these two states, because you would need to be praying after making this announcement. So if you don't have readiness for the prayer and you are calling to the prayer, that would mean that you're going to miss out on the beginning of the prayer, and hence it is disliked. Some more notes: after the words Hayya ala Salah and Hayya ala al-Falah, one replies, again this is for those listening, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. After the words As-salatu khayrun min an-nawm, which is specific for the Fajr prayer, one replies, Sadaqta wa bararta. You have spoken the truth and you have done well. After the words Qad qamati Salah in the iqama, because it's also sunnah to repeat the words of the person saying the iqama. So after he says Qad qamati Salah, it is sunnah to say Aqamaha Allahu wa adamaha. Others add Ma damati samawati wal ard. May Allah establish it and cause it to remain with us, right? As long as the heavens and the earth remain. To recite after the adhan the following supplication first, Salawat on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, because it's mentioned in hadith that whoever repeats the words of the mu'adhin, then recites salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and then reads the following supplication, the Prophet, peace be upon him, guarantees that we will receive his intercession, meaning he will be our lawyer on the day of judgment. And the dua is, Allahumma rabba hadhihi ad-da'wati at-tamma was-salati al-qa'ima ati sayyidana Muhammadan al-wasilata wal-fadila وَبَعَثْهُ مَقَامًا مَحْمُودًا الَّذِي وَعَدْتَهُ إِنَّكَ لَا تُخْلِفُ الْمِيعَادِ. O Allah, Lord of this perfect call and the established salah, give our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam the means and the virtue, and raise him to the station of praise which you have promised him. Indeed, you do not break your promise. The conditions for the person reading the adhan is that he be Muslim, that he be mumayyiz, meaning have reached the age of distinction as mentioned earlier, and then he needs to have sanity, right? He needs to be a person of sanity. And then number 4, to be male if the adhan is for a jama'ah of men. So it is not recommended for women to read out the adhan for all and sundry, but it is still recommended for women to read out the iqama if it is only women present. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. This is just a brief overview of what we've covered in the course thus far. We will change this probably in the next class, inshallah, because from objectives all the way till cleanable impurities, that would be the first section of the book, Tahara, which we've concluded. We've now started a new section on Salah. And to conclude, we just have an overview of what we've covered in this lesson, which was an introduction to Salah, valid excuses for missing Salah. We spoke about the 8 conditions of the prayer. We spoke about what are the ritual impure states, and we spoke about the various levels of awrah, and then the additional notes were on the adhan and the iqama. Until next time, inshallah ta'ala, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad, subhanallahi wa bihamdi, subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.